Well, I'm very pleased to be joined with one of my former colleagues, Mikaela Henschel. Mikaela, first off, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Connor, for having me. It's good to be back on PTLN.
Absolutely. I know we talked to you before in the past, but that was about a different subject. And of course, this time it is a different subject because recently you were on My Why podcast with Jesse Manning, Kristen Travers, talking about your mental health struggles. And, like myself, I've known you for a while, but obviously we didn't know a whole lot about you and in that regard. So just to give us a little bit of a summary on the discussion that you had with Kristen and Jesse about your mental health struggles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was definitely a weird thing because obviously, as a former colleague, I used to be in your seat, kind of asking people the same questions. So it's weird to become the story, but um, my why, since I was in Lloydminster, I always found was such an amazing cause and is the cause that I got help because of the stories they were telling. And I think that's such an important thing that they're doing is making it aware that there is people in your own community that are suffering. So myself, I suffer with chronic depression, anxiety, PTSD. Unfortunately, I was sexually abused as a child, so that came into play. And everyone reaches a breaking point, and I think unfortunately that just happened while I was in Lloydminster, and it just overtook me, and I had to take a step back and go into treatment. But it is because of my why and the mental health initiative that's happening within not only Lloydminster but all over that is helping people, and I'm so happy to be part of that movement.
One of the things you talked about on that podcast was, you were a little worried to kind of you talked to our bosses, and was there any worry about if what your career may possibly what a toll this could possibly take, or are you just saying, you know what, I just need help, doesn't matter what happens with that regard?
No, of course. It was, I suppressed so much of my anxiety and my depression because, I was trying to be that news anchor. I was trying to be, the one that wasn't the story. So there was a lot of suppressing it. But I think at the end of the day, I'm just human, and I needed help. And I don't think I really could have gone forward without asking for that. And I wouldn't be in the place that I am today. But of course, I, went and traveled Australia, and I came back, contemplating, did I do the right thing? Because, it's a career that I loved and I had to take a step back from for my health. But um, I do hope to get back into it one day. I just don't know in what capacity that would mean. But of course, it's crossed my mind. But at the end of the day, I think I took the right steps I needed to do for myself and for my mental health.
One thing you talked about was, the plea for more doctors focusing on mental health, because when you were going to see these doctors, some of them, it took either too long or they just they weren't educated about that subject. So just talk about the plea that you were mentioning on that podcast of, the need for more mental health focused doctors.
Yeah, this is definitely something that with this past year and a half through my mental health struggle, I've really learned a lot about. And I know we have Bell Let's Talk Day, and there's social media campaigns talking about let's end the stigma, let's talk about it. I think we're past that point. For sure, there's still a stigma, but we've passed the point where it's okay to talk about it. And I think there's enough people that know that you can talk about it and they have their supports. Now, the problem now is accessible and affordable healthcare for mental health. We have our government telling us how important mental health is, yet it's not accessible. I was on a waiting list for 7 months before I was able to see a psychiatrist. And in that time, I was already admitted to the hospital in the psych ward. So there's obviously a really large gap. And, had I wanted to go through public treatment, I would have had to wait months. But I had the privilege to go to a private center, which being in the private and the public mental health care, I just noticed such a vast difference. And there was just so much lack of education in the public health system, and it's a long wait list. Whereas, if you have money, you can get in the next day, and I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's fair that the government tells us that mental health is our priority, just like a doctor would be. Just they say it's just as important, but yet my appointments with my counselor are $200 an hour. Like there's just an unjust. So we're talking about it, but then who can afford it? It's not coming hand in hand anymore. I think that's really the big issue is like it's unaffordable. Medicine is expensive. I think just doctors in general need to be more versed in mental health, because especially in the world today, people who haven't dealt with mental health through this pandemic are now dealing with it for the first time. And they're going to see it's going to take them months to get in, and it's just not fair. So I think I'm a really strong advocate for getting everyone the right course of action in a timely fashion, because that is really what is lacking, and it is expensive.
Absolutely, and of course many families still continue to worry about those costs, and I know a lot of people are advocating for that as well, like yourself. And just lastly, Mikaela, I know with many people sometimes they don't want to talk about their struggles, or they're afraid to talk about it. So why now talk about your struggles?
You know what? It was just a personal choice. I think through suppressing, my sexual abuse for so many years, and while I was a news anchor over at Primetime Local News, it was a lot of the Me Too movement, and it just all triggered me. And it was because of my why, when I was covering those stories, that I noticed it's not just me, and it's one of those my why Tyler's story that I helped cover that gave me the courage to say I need help. And I have so many people who have messaged me being like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you were sick, I never would have thought. So it's such a common thing. I think it affects almost everyone in the world. Knows someone who's affected by mental health. It's your neighbor, it's your brother, it's your mom, everyone at this point. So I think it's important to share my story in hopes of helping someone, because I was once that person that got help because of someone else's story. However, I don't think that everyone needs to come out and tell their story. That's a very personal thing, and if you want to keep it to yourself, that's completely okay. But I felt like I am in a good, healthy point in my life where I felt I was ready to tell my story and hopefully help somebody out.
Well, that's really great to hear, Mikaela. And anyone that's watching, if you or yourself, or if you know someone that is in need of help, please call your nearest health authority, or if you need immediate help, please go to the hospital. But Mikaela, thanks a lot for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Connor.